Hello everybody, I'm Justin Thomas and welcome to Bite Size History. If this is your first time finding me, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification button. In this video, we will be covering a Welsh hero, a man who many consider to be a symbol of freedom to this day by securing a place in history through multiple monuments raised in his name, and amongst popular culture with the naming of pubs in his honor, even being rumored to be one of the historical inspirations for the character of Robb Stark in both the series of A Song of Ice and Fire as well as HBO's Game of Thrones. And having his real-life events affected by a Welsh prophecy that is very much similar to the fictional prophecy that is known in the fantasy series as the prince that was promised, but in real life was known as Wamab Daragon, the destined prophesied son, or son of destiny. I'm speaking of a man that played the real Game of Thrones, and became a real prince. I'm speaking of a Welsh hero, and to be the last native Welshman to hold the title of Prince of Wales. I'm speaking of Owain Glyndwr. Since this is bite-sized history, we will be condensing parts of this amazing story, so if you feel like there are some oversimplifications, this is the reason, but we will be attempting to tell the whole story of Owain Glyndwr. So let's start at the beginning. I would also like to note that a lot of Welsh names of both the people and places in this story are highly complex and difficult to pronounce, so bear with me. I'll be showing a lot of the names on screen in order to avoid butchering them completely. Early years. Owain Glyndwr, which is actually a shortened version of his full name, which means Owen of the Glen of the River of the Deep, would end up leading the last attempted rebellion against the English in the 15th century, but yet, ironically, Owen was born during a time of peace between the English and the Welsh in 1354. He was also from a powerful Anglo-Welsh family that descended from princes on both sides. His parents could trace their loyal lineage back to before the Norman conquest. In fact, Owen could claim ties to 4 of the major ruling houses of Wales. Losing a father. It is commonly believed that Owen's father died when Owen was around 11, and shortly after would be fostered at the home of David Hammer, a lawyer who eventually rose to the King's Bench. Evidence suggests that young Owen was sent to London to study law at the Inns of the Court, which he did, but instead of going into law, he instead joined the army in 1384 and served under King Richard II, starting in 1385. Even though he did not follow in his foster father's career, he married Hammer's daughter in 1383. It's important to note that the Hammers were a powerful border family. This looks to be a marriage of mutual convenience, but more so showed Owen's allegiance to the English more than ever. During Owen's time in the army, he served under such notable persons such as Sir John of Gaunt, and was actually a squire to Henry Bolingbroke, the future King of England, King Henry IV, and Owen's future enemy. Man of the March. Before 1400, there had been little to indicate that Owen would rise against the crown. Like many other Welsh gentry of the period, he had shown himself ready to assimilate to the regime established by Edward I's conquest. He had studied law at the Inns of the Court and served in royal armies in England, Scotland, and France. He had married into a powerful border family that further tied him to the English, yet this was only part of the picture. Within Welsh society, Owen occupied a special place thanks to his lineage, both through his father and through his mother, whose bloodline made Owen a direct descendant of Owain Lugach, also known as Owen of the Red Hand, the last male descendant of the dynasty of Gwynedd, and a would-be Prince of Wales if he had not been assassinated by an English agent in France in 1378. More importantly, Owen the Red Hand, as he was known to the English, was the figure of the Welsh prophecy, known as the Wamab Daragon, meaning the destined prophesied son, or son of destiny, a figure of Welsh legend destined to force the English out of Britain and reclaim it for the Celtic inhabitants. A number of figures have been called Wamab Daragon in history. Here are just a few of the notable figures that took up the mantle of this, and a title that would be bestowed upon Owen himself. There's no doubt Owain Glyndwr had the strongest ties to the princely dynasties of the era before the conquest of 1282. Even before 1400, leading Welsh poets of the day notably made a point to remind Glyndwr of his distinguished pedigree that made him the sole head of Wales. So what does this mean? Well, it's highly likely that certain people within the Welsh community most likely pressured Owen and even expected him to a point to be a savior of sorts for the Welsh people. Now this could go to a lot of people's heads, especially in the 15th century when prophecy and all things occult had a much larger presence in the everyday life of the people. In fact, the man who is known as the last Wamab Daragon is Henry VII, who utilized the legend in order to gain support once he landed in Wales, which he specifically chose Wales for this reason alone as the point of invasion of mainland England. But nonetheless, Glyndwr was very much a measured man and loyal to the king. Entered the English king's military service in 1384, and he undertook a garrison duty on the English-Scottish border at arguably one of the worst times of violence between the English and Scottish, so this was not a cake job. He also served King Richard under John of Gaunt, again in Scotland, on the 3rd of September 1386, and was called in to give evidence in the first heraldric trial at Chester, which was a dispute between the use of coat of arms by two rival families. He was personally called in by the king and testified in the king's favor. In March of 1387, Owain was in southeast England and present at the English Channel for the defeat of the Franco-Spanish-Flemish fleet off the coast of Kent. Point being, Owain Glyndwr was very much the king's man at this point. Glyndwr continued to serve within the English military up until the death of his father-in-law in 1387, Sir David Hammer. Now, he was knighted earlier that same year by Richard, but this seemed to be the right time for Glyndwr to return to Wales as executor of his estate. And when you look at it, it makes sense. I mean, by this time in Glyndwr's life, 1387, Glyndwr had gained 3 years of concentrated military experiences in different theaters and seen firsthand some key events and people. But during these last years of King Richard's reign, could constitute its own video just by itself, in which the king was distracted by a growing conflict between the Lords Appellant and most notably the future king. We had spoken about him earlier, Henry Bolingbroke, Henry IV. Glyndwr's opportunities seemed to go from near endless to very limited due to the combination of these events, most notably the downfall of King Richard, as well as the deaths of some of Glyndwr's most important allies and political connections. It is believed Owain returned to his stable Welsh estates with every intention of living there quietly for the remainder of his life, which is exactly what he did do for 10 years during his 40s. In fact, a famous bard, Red Lolo, visited Owain during these times and even wrote a number of odes praising Owain's good character, his liberality, and all of Owain's wonderful qualities that made him a good man. Now, I'll remind you, a bard's job is to create pieces of work that shine a good light on whoever they are working for, but Owain had many bards not in his service at this time and throughout his whole life that wrote plenty of great things about him, and Owain genuinely seems to be a good guy for the times. So not only has Owain seemingly done everything right, but he's done it with the right people and for the right people. But then, the king that he had served so loyally ran into some pretty bad luck himself. For a period of a couple years, King Richard was just barely holding on to power, as it was being slowly stripped away, in many's opinion usurped by Henry Bolingbroke. Owain stayed out of it. Slowly but surely, by the year 1400, Richard was dead. It's believed that Henry left him to starve, so there'd be no marks on his body, but nonetheless, Henry IV was the new king. Henry Bolingbroke, the man that Owain was once a squire to and had fought side by side. Why would Owain be shown any disfavor? He had still fought for the king and had fought with the new king whether he thought he was a usurper or not. Well, things take a turn here. So how did Owain Glyndwr go from being a loyal servant to the crown to becoming an enemy of the crown? Well, for one, friends of the past King Richard were no friends with the new king. In fact, King Henry IV spent the majority of his time as king in constant conflict with those who actually opposed his rule and those who he saw as opposing the crown. A series of foolish actions were made by the so-called usurper king. A lot of these actions were slights towards Glyndwr himself. Now, all of this despite the king's advisors, warning the king not to pry too hard with Glyndwr and the Welsh, actually considering themselves quite lucky that Glyndwr had been so passive up until this point. They were well aware of the power that Glyndwr could wield if he chose to, but yet the king persisted, so a series of incidents pushed Glyndwr into open rebellion, but not before trying to still do things the legal way, because remember, he was a man of the law. One of these first incidents was a dispute over land. One of the barons, Lord Grey, had openly seized a good portion of Owain's land, but Glyndwr, being a man of the law, made an appeal to the English court, but his petition was flatly ignored, and then the following year, Lord Grey issued an edict to Owain for a mustering of troops near the Scottish border. Now, what this was a claim that Owain didn't send the troops that were ordered when they were ordered. It is known now that Owain would have sent the troops that Lord Grey said he ordered, but Lord Grey never sent him the order in the first place. Glyndwr, even now, attempts to appear in court and appeal this, but is flatly ignored and loses the case again. So after over a year of trying to go the legal way, and in hindsight it seems like he was just being goaded into a fight, the English get what they've been asking for. Now at this last parliamentary meeting, when Glyndwr is trying to go the legal route, there is a prominent Welshman that stands up and warns them once more about what could happen if they continue to mistreat Owain Glyndwr. It's rumored that they then say, "What do we care for these barefoot beasts?" And they label Glyndwr a traitor to the crown. So Glyndwr finally decides to stand up and do something. And when Glyndwr does this, he does this with all the bravado in the world. He's not a man that does things by halves. He pronounces himself the Prince of Wales, a spot that has been a hereditary position for the oldest son of the current king, thus serving as a placeholder for the future king of England. This is taken as a direct challenge to the crown, and the rebellion, our war for independence, begins. Now, the last man to do this, the last native Welshman to hold the title of Prince of Wales, was a century before this, and was another supposed Wabab Daragon, the chosen son. And it did not end well for him. It ended in assassination. Would this be the fate for Owain Glyndwr? Well, when Henry hears this, he's currently on his way to Scotland to try to quell another rebellion. Again, Henry's hold on his kingdom was not very solid at this point whatsoever, so it's still very unclear why he insisted on picking a fight with the Welsh, but nonetheless he did. Turns around immediately once he hears about Glyndwr being crowned Prince of Wales, and starts to head southwest, but takes some time to get there. Glyndwr, being a man, yes, of the law, but actually being more of a military man, utilizes genius guerrilla warfare, using the skillfulness of the Welsh archers, and provides the king with quite a welcoming party. They get bogged down in the marshes, the weather works against them, and then as soon as they're able to assemble, Glyndwr does not face them in a pitched battle right away. Being a great strategist, uses this win to his advantage, and also uses the prophecy of the Wabab Daragon in his favor, and hundreds of Welshmen flock to his side. He then carries out a series of raids. You see, when Edward I conquered Wales for England, he left more castles per square mile than anywhere else on earth. These fortifications would be used against the English. And the first fortification that Glyndwr takes belongs to his old friend Reginald Grey, the man that started this all. Now they go into Griffin, where Grey is from. It's market day. They don't have enough men to siege it, but they do go in under disguise. In the middle of market, on market day, they uncloak themselves and battle ensues. By the end of this, there's only 3 buildings still standing. Glyndwr and the rest of the Welsh carry out 7 more attacks just like this. It's known as the September Rampage. By this time, the king is well into Welsh territory, but winter is about to hit. Glyndwr, being the intelligent man he is, takes to the highlands, where they're very comfortable, they're very safe, and they know the English will be very hesitant to follow. So in efforts to keep this a actual bite-sized history, we will be breaking it into 2 parts. We will conclude tomorrow evening, right before Vikings kicks off on the History Channel, so make sure to be looking out for my weekly recap and reviews of the show every Wednesday, and we will have the epic conclusion of Owain Glyndwr's story. I'm Justin Thomas, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys soon. Justin Thomas here, and if you enjoyed that video, why don't you check out some of the videos right here, possibly right here, but make sure to subscribe right here, and we'll see you guys soon.